Hi, I'm Shira Carpel.
And I'm Shayna Gaunt, and we're board-certified behavior analysts. At How to ABA, we provide practical resources, community, and support to ABA professionals. In each episode of our podcast, we will be having real conversations with real people, sharing real stories about ABA.
We'll share relevant strategies and actionable tips that will make us all better ABA practitioners. It's the ABA content you need that you're not going to learn in a textbook. Hi, everyone. Today, we are very lucky to be talking to Dr. Laura Cesaroni. She is the Clinical Director of FERN, which is based in Toronto, York region. And it's doing some really amazing things for parents and families. So welcome.
Thank you. How exciting to be here. And we have such a long relationship. So it's really nice for me to be here with both of you. So thank you for having me.
Yes. Laura, it's so great that you're on this. We've talked about self-regulation so much. And every time that I have a client in your area, I always refer them to you for self-regulation, anxiety, any type of parent coaching related to anxiety. I'm always, you've got to see Laura Cesaroni. You've got to see Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura, go to FERN.
Yeah.
So I'm so happy that you're here to be able to share this with everybody.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. And I think part of the conversation is why, we're having this conversation is because as ABA practitioners, there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we don't do. And I think parents and families is a huge piece of what we do. And so we'd love to hear more about how you support parents and families, and maybe start by telling us a little bit about FERN and what it does.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm going to start a little bit. I'm going to go into FERN. Let me start with a little bit about first with SelfReg and how I got into that, because it's kind of a nice journey and how FERN actually came to be. So I remember a number of years ago when I was at York University, which is in Toronto, and I was doing my undergraduate in psychology. And I had heard of Dr. Stuart Schenker because he was and he's the CEO of the Merit Center. And he actually was running a clinical study. He had a huge institute at York University, and he was working with little ones and families on the spectrum. And he was doing it with Stanley Greenspan. So that's how early I knew Stuart, which is amazing. I kind of lost touch with the work that he was doing, although I was familiar with the research and the research is out there. But a few years ago, I was Googling self-regulation. This was about 6-7 years ago. And the first thing that came up on Google was his company, the Merit Center. And I saw that they were running courses. So I got in touch with them right away, and I wanted to do some PD with them and training. And I think I went to SelfReg because I was looking for strategies. I was looking for strategies for working with kids, right? Especially these big behaviors, right? Because at FERN, that's what I was experiencing. We were seeing so many kiddos that were dysregulated, anxious, and families as well. So I think that's what brought me to that Google of self-regulation. And then what I ended up doing was going through all their professional development there. And I learned quite quickly that it wasn't a program in terms of where I was going to get strategies, in terms of specific strategies for working with behaviors, right? It's been a long journey of understanding what self-regulation is, but from the original definition of self-regulation, and we could talk about that a little bit later on, it's really understanding stress, right? And the importance of relationships. And I'd encourage anyone to go to the Merit Center website to find out more about their courses. So this brings me to FERN. And so within the last few years through the Merit Center, I've been facilitating their courses. And one of the courses that I've brought to FERN is the parenting course. And that's what I want to talk about today. So FERN is where I am right now. It's in the GTA, and we work with a number of families and caregivers and educators, and actually a lot of students come to us for placement as well. an intern here, which is fantastic, and it's a not-for-profit. So we consult with a lot of schools and other organizations under the FERN umbrella, and we offer a variety of services and supports. Now, it's shifted since the pandemic a little bit because most of our stuff had to go online. Pre-pandemic, we were doing a lot here in terms of groups. We were running yoga and art therapy and dance classes and social skills and girls group. It's really shifted a little bit from that. But my first real job was working in Toronto, and I was trained as I went to U of T in Oise in child psychology. So I trained really early in completing psychoeducational and psychological testing, and I worked primarily through Sick Kids Hospital and the Toronto Institute of Psychiatry. It's interesting just because of FERN. What resonated with me very early when I was interning and as a young clinician were the families. And I knew that when I was in these settings that my relationship with them was really, really important. But again, I was also really super privileged to work with great mentors, right, that were relationally based as well. So something that really stood out for me as a clinician was the stress within those systems, especially when families were needed to go through that diagnostic process, and especially standardized testing, which is a stress test, right? Basically.
Right? We've talked about that so much too. Laura, what you failed to mention is that you do have a behavioral background, and you do understand functions of behavior, and you understand all that. But you and I have had so many conversations about there's more to it than that. So with so many individuals, we see not only the individuals with autism we work with, but also with their families. There's so many more reasons why kids are behaving or misbehaving. And that's because, of the 4 functions of behavior that we all talk about so much more though. And it's that stress piece. And that's one thing as behaviorists that I don't think we're recognizing enough. And that's why I always rely on you for that.
And I think that's really good to point out, because SelfReg does use the original definition, right, of self-regulation, and it is stress-based. That is the original definition. Stuart did a study, I'm going to say it was 2015, but I could be wrong, where he looked at the variety of definitions of self-regulation. There were 447 definitions of self-regulation.
Wow.
447. And you can look at the study, and I can provide it to your members if they're interested. Only one was the original definition, which SelfReg uses. So it's fascinating when we're talking about conceptual clarity, right? And what's going on. And I think recognizing the stress for families early on in my training is kind of what first excited me about that SelfReg framework, right? Because it kind of acknowledged my experiences as a parent, right? Not only that, but my experiences as a clinician now, and what the families were telling me, what the kiddos were telling me, what the teens were telling me. But you know what? I have to say what my gut was telling me about stress. And it's like we kind of knew it, but the science of self-reg, the science of stress and self-regulation really helped me understand it a lot better. So that's kind of my early history and what brought me to FERN and wanting to care for and support families. And
so true.
Yeah.
So often we go into a home and clinicians often get frustrated because why aren't they just taking data? Why aren't they following through with this protocol?
No.
And we tend to forget at that missing piece, which is there's a whole nother, big picture that until you're a parent or until you really understand what's going on, it's hard sometimes for a clinician to realize how big of a part stress plays in that. And I think that, over many years of us practicing, I for sure realized that plays such a huge piece in our kids' success. And we really can't ignore the fact that it's not just about the functions and the follow through and, training. It's not just about that. There's so much more that goes on in a home. So it's really, really important for us to at least take that into consideration.
Yeah. And sure, what you're saying is so true. It's absolutely perfect. So we have to consider it. We have to be aware of it. But listen, we have to be aware of it for ourselves as well, right? Especially, I'd imagine, with your members, that they are going into homes, right? And they're coming with their own energy. They're coming with their own stress, totally. Right? And
such a great point.
So it's not only the parental stress, the child or the client stress, but it's also their own stress as the therapist, right? And that's something that I didn't think that I don't think I was really aware of it. I don't think I was really aware of my own stress, even when I wanted to do FERN. I thought, oh, this it's going to be about families and caring and supporting. It was all about them, right? It was all about them. It very little about me as a clinician. But you know what? That's what matters most. That's where the self is in self-regulation. We matter most, especially us as parents, right? And I know both of you have very young children, I think, at home, right?
Mm-hmm. Not so young anymore, Laura.
Younger than mine, Shayna. I have adult children now. My goodness.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I use it so much as a clinician. You're right. Just in the perspective of the co-regulation piece and being able to be a partner in regulation, the whole can't versus won't perspective. I use it so much. I train my staff on using it, and I think it's an important perspective.
No, that's great, Shira. So, it's perfect. I mean, I love that because, it's getting out of that self-control mindset and understanding that it's not about self-management, right? Which, our education system is so really, driven by that. When you see that self-regulation on that report card, right? What is it? It's self-management, right? So it's really about understanding and highlighting the differences between self-reg, right? And self-regulation, those 446 definitions of self-regulation, which are all about self-management, will, right? Willpower.
So I'm curious what is the definition of self-regulation?
Oh gosh. Okay. So it's hard to kind of just sum it up. So here's the way I like to sum it up. When we were doing the training through the organization, we had to develop an elevator speech for what self-reg is. And my elevator speech is constantly evolving. So here's my elevator speech that I think that I'm really comfortable with right now, because listen, I'm a learner. I'm not an expert in this at all. It's a learning journey. And every time I do PD with Stuart or Susan Hopkins, honestly, I just dive deeper into the science and the understanding of these concepts. So basically, simply what I can say, it's a 5-step model of managing stress and using that original definition of stress, of course, right? These 5 steps, I think for me, and I think Dr. Shanker would agree, were designed to help us restore. And this includes children, teens, and adults across the lifespan. I think a primary piece of this 5-step model is restoration. And I think understanding what restoration is and why it's important is super critical today, right? Because we are in a time with huge stressors, which we can't control. Like for example, the stress of the pandemic, right? We can't eliminate these obvious, huge, major stressors. Now, although we can't eliminate them, right, we can learn to manage them, right? And we can understand them and uncover these stressors and understand that they impact our state. They impact parent state. They impact child, teen state, right? How we restore for me is huge for the work I do with my families here and the kids that I see. And Shayna, like the kids that, we see for anxieties, especially, right? And it's to support that restoration, which is a process. So I think that 5-step model from SelfReg really, really does a good job helping us understand how to kind of titrate stress and reduce stress, right? And one of the biggest problems we're seeing right now are maladaptive ways of dealing with stress. And we've all experienced this, I'd love to hear from you guys, but for me, I mean, one that I really maladapted was, being hit by at work with a variety of stressors in the 5 domains that we talk about in SelfReg, getting home at the end of the day, not having my dinner on, right? Knowing that I probably have a couple more hours of work to do later on. And what do? I walk into the pantry, open up the bag of Mr. Hayes, salt and vinegar chips, right? Like I need the fuel, like I need it right away. It's maladaptive, right? But it's actually my body's way of regulating because it offers momentary relief, right? It does. It offers me that boost that I need, my body needs at that time. But what does it do? It shuts down other opportunities for me to recover. Right?
Absolutely. And we talk about, as ABA professionals, we talk about acceptance and commitment therapy. So ACT is a big thing in the field. And this is very similar. And, we talk about, on our best days, what does our, how do we think and how do we feel and what do our behaviors look like? But then on our worst days, what does that look like? And I love that term that you said, it just restore. It's not about treatment. It is treatment of stress, but it's not about, I'm going to fix this. It's about, I'm going to restore it back to the way it used to be. And I love that term. So it's about, okay, great. So on my worst day, on your worst day, you grab for the potato chips. On my worst day, it's actually avoidance. I just shut right down and I avoid everything. And then the next day it makes it worse because I've got a pile of emails, I've got phone calls I need to return and everything else. But that avoidance is what I need. But that's my worst day. So how do I get back to my best day? And what do those behaviors look like?
Absolutely love that. And I love that you're highlighting, Shana. It's perfect. Avoidance, because this is what we do in step 1 of the method. We reframe avoidance. We reframe bad eating. We reframe every behavior, right? So avoidance is a huge one. I mean, it's one of my stress fronts, actually, avoidance, right? Isolating self. And the important thing is we do this for ourselves first. We try to understand it for ourselves. It almost kind of shifts our lens then when we're looking at families, when we're looking at kiddos, because then we're seeing these kind of big behaviors like defiance, oppositional behavior, a separation anxiety, depression. And we kind of can shift our lens and think, okay, that's stress behavior, just like avoidance and grabbing chips is for me. So it is maladaptive. I mean, the problem is that we want to get folks and ourselves back to adaptive ways of regulating. Restoration actually is the 5th step in the model, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've seen, lots of parents who you work with at FERN. What would you say are like the main stressors that parents experience that they may be using these maladaptive behaviors to cope with?
So I'm going to, because I'm just going to pull something up because I don't have these memorized because there's quite a few, because I've been running the parenting course for quite a while through FERN. And what we do in our not virtual, we actually used to meet, right now we're virtual, but we always collect our stressors. It's amazing, the things. Now, remember, these are, they're caregivers, they're grandparents, they're parents, and the majority have quite vulnerable children at home, okay? So here are some themes, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it.
As you're grabbing that, I keep thinking back to, my 20s and when I first became a BCBA and first got into this field. And I just thought, I'm on top of the world and I can do no wrong. And, I walk in as a 20-year-old and I think I'm the expert in things. And parents look at me like, well, okay, so she's got a lot of energy, but what does that have to do with me, right? And then I get frustrated at the end of the day because parents wouldn't follow through with suggestions or teachers wouldn't do certain things. And, now, after we've chatted and everything else, but hearing like stressors, oh, wow, we teach our kids to take perspective, but we ourselves as therapists aren't perspective taking. So I would love to hear these stressors because we all need to be aware of perspective taking and
right. I'm just you're so right. And I think that's the soft eyes that the Self-Reg always speaks about and Susan Hopkins speaks about. It does give us a more compassionate lens, right, to what's in front of us. Okay, so here are some of them. So and these are the ones that come up all the time, okay? Those are the ones I'm going to highlight. So the demands for doing. The mere demand for doing. feeling like the training never ends. So the group really identified that in these demands for doing, they weren't able to be. They just weren't able to be in their family and find those moments of restoration outside of scheduled times, right? We always say to families and for ourselves, okay, well, we'll schedule that mommy-daughter time or that daddy-daughter time, right? And we'll do it on the weekend. But, we really need to be thinking about being, and restoring throughout our day. So the demands were really, really high, right? And doing, just the mere fact of having to do felt like pressure. And that was a demand on their body, right? When the resources were already depleted. Think about it, because they have vulnerable children at home, right? Okay, so cognitive demands. Now in SelfReg, we do a 5-domain model, and we think about stressors in the 5 domains. So these are some of the cognitive demands. Staying connected to the latest research and information, right?
Or staying too connected to it with Google out there, right? There's like, what do you sort through and what do you not?
Oh, that's so good, right? I didn't highlight that there, but that's so good, Shana. You're absolutely right. So, and the treatment options, right? Because things pop up all the time, depending where the research goes, depending where people are located, right? And so that's absolutely right. And then, of course, the time constraints. That was a huge one. And then planning and scheduling interventions and follow-ups, right? Constant psychoeducation and being labeled. Now, this was an interesting one that comes up. Being labeled as a parent that does either too much or too little to support their child.
Interesting.
Especially academically, right? Because most of these kiddos are identified as exceptional, right, in the education system. So parents are constantly, the cognitive demand of keeping up with the curriculum, keeping up with the expectations in the education system. So those were some within the cognitive domain. You want to hear some social demands?
Absolutely.
So this is the social domains. So having therapists in their homes is definitely a stressor. Multiple specialists. So it's not only one, right? It's multiple specialists that families have to travel to, and meetings. And then, of course, the one that comes up often is the caring for extended families, like aging parents. That's one that comes up quite a bit. We have pro-social stressors, and this is really about feeling the stress of others, right? And our parents they're super feelers, right? And they're in an education system where they're already worried about their own child, but then they're very, very aware that the educators are burnt out as well. So recognizing the burnout of other people, but needing to be that advocate, that warrior, that is a demand on them. That is huge. Of course, there's the emotion domain, and I think we're most familiar probably with the emotion domain. There's a lot of grief that's talked about, a lot of worry, especially when there's decisions needing to be made around medicine. Am I making the right decision? There's a sense of shame, incompetence, a lot of self-blame, and there's fear. I mean, because, we think so forward, right? That there's a lot of fear. Especially in the world that we're living with right now. I think maybe let's just talk quickly about the social stressors, because I think you guys might find this one, and I don't think you'll be surprised by this one. So there's exclusion, right? When you have a vulnerable child from typical social contexts and networks. And then this was a really interesting one. And I actually, I learn from them all the time. That's why I say I'm not an expert, I'm a learner. This was really an interesting one for me. So we've got low levels of social interaction paired with the pressure to socialize a child.
That's
right.
Wow.
Like, think about that one, right? And I guess the tricky part is, and is that everyone is different. And of course, I have this kind of demographic here, but so all our stressors are different, right? And they're often hidden. They're often hidden, these stressors. We think these major stressors, right? Like too much pop for our kids, or work-life balance, or not getting enough, like the nature deficit or something like that, right? But what we're talking about are the hidden stressors, and they are most costly. They are most costly to our system. They're the ones that burn our energy. So without that fifth, step that you guys were speaking about restoring, you can imagine how these clusters of stressors bounce up against each other and they kind of magnify. Yeah, for us and for our children, right?
Yeah. And they're constant.
They're constant.
And it's not just one stressor, it's, 20 of them all at the same time.
I mean, isn't that fascinating to think about?
It's actually making me having to take a few deep breaths, right? Because it's a lot. And I talk to a lot of parents about this already, so I am aware, but this makes me more aware of, wow, just how much people are going through. And just a personal story. I'm a very active person, and I do a lot of sports and recreation and everything else and what have you. And I'm very social. So, for me, getting out on the weekend and doing this and that and what have you, and bringing kids with me, it's not a huge deal. And, I'm just very quick to recommend that to families. But you're right, Laura, there's a lot of families who aren't extroverts like I am. There's a lot of families who are introverts who prefer, to be in the coziness of their own home, where they've had a really stressful week, and the last thing they want to do is go out on a busy Saturday. So, for us to look at that and recommend doing these things to parents is almost like we need to recognize our own bias. It's almost a bias.
Yes.
And it's, that's not talked about because, we just have to assume, well, you've got to get your child socialized, so you must do this and this and this. And you really need to sit back and go, well, is that part of the parents' repertoire? Are they able to do that?
That's it. And are they able to do it when being hit and caught in this stress cycle?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then how do we support parents? How do we care for parents? I was just reading a study from 2019. It's out of Washington, and I can't remember the institute that did it, but it's called, I think, Vibrant and Healthy Kids. And they actually made a really important statement in it recently. And of course, we know that parenting and relationships, early on are important for our children. And it builds resilience and develop how important it is. But then they made a statement, and it really stuck out for me. It was something along the lines of how we care for our parents is very important. And that's what the science is showing. The fact that they use the word care, I mean, it just really kind of hit my heart, actually, because parents need to be nurtured as well. Yeah. It just spoke to me. Parents need to be nurtured, right? And sometimes we just throw it all on our kids, right? And that experience of who's recognizing us, who's nurturing us, who's recognizing our overwhelm and the stress that we're under, right? And again, it's not about, like, we can't, eliminate all the stress in today's world, right? This isn't what this is about. But I think, Shana, you said it. It's about kind of checking ourselves maybe and our biases and how we see people and how we see kiddos and families. Yeah, I love the way you said that. And then Shira, you spoke about the co-regulation part, and I know we're not going to speak about that, right now, but it's so important, because when we care for others, it is about that co-regulating piece.
One of the quotes I find myself using all the time is when, teachers and staff are frustrated because it's the kids who have, like, the hidden diagnoses, the ones that are invisible, that are the most frustrating sometimes. And I find myself saying all the time, like, he's not giving you a hard time, he's having a hard time. Yeah. And having that perspective, like, they're still frustrated, and you still need to validate how hard it is to care for these kids. But I think having the perspective of, this is not a matter of misbehavior, it's not malicious, it's, a child who's struggling. And if you see it from that perspective of their whole body is overwhelmed, and the stress that they're just not coping and they're not managing. I think that's an important perspective for us to have.
Yeah, it's perfect. And that's it. I think that's really the crux of SelfReg, quite honestly. It really gets to what's most important, and it's the relationships. And, also what I have found and what I've heard from other people who kind of work within this model is that the minute you do, Kira, like you said, have that kind of reframing that you're doing, it kind of lowers our stress, right? It just kind of like, and it gives us a breath, right? That's a restorative breath. Just like Shana was saying, she's feeling it in her chest, right? And I understand that because, I'm kind of energy centered that way as well. And I can feel that from other people as well, especially the families and the kids I work with. And I immediately notice it in my breath. I immediately notice the tension. But what if we weren't? What if we weren't that self-aware? What if we let that pile up throughout the day, throughout the weeks, throughout the months? Right. And we couldn't take that deep breath at that moment.
And I can see a lot of our listeners right now saying, oh my gosh, that's me. That's me right there. I have so much going on. I have a huge caseload. I have, a lot of clients that are engaging in negative behavior. I've got parents who aren't following through. I've got my home life that's doing this, and I've got this going on, and I've got my own kids, and I've got this. And, so I feel for everyone out there listening to this right now.
Yeah. And I remember once with my daughter, and I'll just tell you a little personal story, because a lot of these things that you guys are bringing forward, we're not going to be able to fix them, especially in the moment, right? We cannot fix this dysregulation, this high arousal, the anxiety in the moment. So what are we supposed to do when we can't fix it? So my daughter had, she was a teen and had gone through something really, really challenging, and I have permission to talk about this. And I won't go into details about what happened because it's not the time right now. But as a parent, I couldn't fix it. The event had happened, and I couldn't fix it as a parent. But boy, did I try. Boy, did I try to problem solve around it. Did I cheerlead her on? Did I try to reassure her? Did I spend endless nights up with her thinking about, what to do about it? Here's what happened. She remained in distress. And I was like, what is going on? What is going on? Like, why can't I fix this? Because I didn't need to fix it. The event had happened. What did I need to do? I needed to help her manage the stress. That's all it was. I needed her. The stress was up. I needed to help her manage it and to regulate down. So I did that, Shira. Like you said, through the co-regulation, there's that interbrain connection that we talk about. So I soothed her. I soothed that kindled alarm, that sensitized system. It took days, right? But that's all my job was. As soon as I recognized and became aware that that was my job at that time, I was able to breathe through it. And it would be like time on the sofa, time giving her hand massages, time making cups of tea for her. And my job was not to fix it. And sometimes when we can sit in that distress and understand that my job as a parent at that time was just to soothe, it's amazing. It's kind of like the magic bullet, quite honestly.
Easier said than done sometimes, though. But
oh, for sure. I get it.
But definitely reframing, right? Definitely reframing. As a parent, all you want to do is, protect your kids and keep them safe. And then when they are out in the world, if you can fix situations, that would be amazing, and step in with all your experience. But you have to let them live, and you have to let them get through those experiences.
Yeah. I'm in that teenage phase now. I have like almost 3 teenagers. And so,
oh my gosh,
it is the story you kind of described is like every day. So it's very stressful.
I'm sure you are so self-aware that you're doing a lot of what I needed to learn to do with my daughter, Shira. I'm sure.
I'm not as soothing as you are. Your voice is just so calming. So,
that's an interesting thing because, we get the question all the time, like when our kids are in, especially the kids that we're working with, like, what do you do when they're that aroused, when they're in that meltdown? That's why I was Googling, dysregulation the first time when, Stuart's organization came up, like, what do we do? Give me the strategies. And, the nonverbals, it's the first thing we do, right? We learn about how our voice how to pace our voice. We learn about the soothing tones, because what the child is picking up on when they're in that high arousal state is all our nonverbals.
Yeah, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. It's how your body language is. It's how your tone is, for sure.
Yeah, it's really about slowing down, right? It's about slowing down. Yeah, super
Absolutely.
important.
So you're doing some really great work at FERN with
Yeah.
parenting courses and Self-Reg.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So let's talk about this one specifically, right? Because I think it's a great one if parents do want to learn more about the Self-Reg model, right? So what we do at FERN is actually we purchase the course from the Merit Center. And it's great because families have different ways of moving through the course. So it's online, and they can do it from their home. And there's 10 modules. So how we run it at FERN is they get the platform and they get their login, and they have it for 9 months to a year actually. So it's really slow paced, which is I think really super important given the stressors that we've identified with our families. They have a year to work with the course. And what they do is it's different, quite honestly. Some families will take the course and they will go away, and then they'll want under the FERN umbrella, maybe some different supports and services, maybe, some time with a clinician, maybe some support for their child. Other families want to go deeper in the concepts in the course. And those are the families that actually do the course at home, and they come and join us in our now. Prior to the pandemic, it was a chat here, but right now it's a virtual chat. And it actually has opened up the possibilities actually for so many different parents to join, and that they don't have to come to FERN. So there's different ways of working through the course. And we can talk about the course if you think that we should maybe just talk a little bit about what the modules are. I can go through that.
Let's do it. That's great. Yeah.
Okay. So it's 10 modules. You virtually will hear from Dr. Shanker and Dr. Hopkins, who's the executive director of the Merit Center, and they introduce the topics in each module. Then basically this parenting course, it's kind of less about the science and more about the practical parenting possibilities is what I'm going to say. And I really like that because you have a lot of parents joining in the course and actually talking through how they've applied Self-Reg to their lives. And it's fantastic. You'll also meet some other experts in the field, like Dr. Jean Clinton, and she's amazing. I think, Shana, Dr. Clinton, but she...
I don't know her, but she's incredible. And she's done some virtual workshops at my daughter's school. And she talks about making connections making connections first. And I think of that from a behaviorist point of view of, we talk about pairing and going in as a therapist and making connections. And she talks about it from a parental standpoint. And I love the terminology she uses.
Yeah. So you meet her throughout the course, and talk about a soothing voice, Shira. I could listen to Dr. Clinton forever. Honestly, I've seen her in person. I've seen her in a lot of workshops, and same with Stuart. He has a beautiful voice. I could listen to him forever as well. And it makes a difference, right, when you're sharing this space and sharing this learning, and I think that from what I've heard from parents, and I've gone through the course myself many times, is that it's soothing. Actually, all the courses at Self-Reg I find quite soothing. It is my professional development, but it's also my restoration, actually. So module 1, we can just go through quickly. Module 1 is kind of an introduction to what Self-Reg is, and you'll basically hear a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. Module 2 kind of dives into those 5 domains of stress that we highlighted with the parents that we were speaking about. It's the biological stressors, the cognitive stressors, the social stressors, and other stressors as well. So that's module 2. But then module, I guess it would be 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, actually dives into that 5-step Self-Reg model. So you'll learn deeply what that model is that we've been touching on here, and it will really help you kind of move through the model for yourself and for your own child. And the 5 steps, I think, help parents understand the why to some of the stress behaviors they're seeing and what they can do for it, what they can do about the behaviors. The last modules, like 8 and 10, they're more full circle. There's a lot of storytelling, which I think families enjoy. And modules 8 and 10 kind of dive into maybe what this feels like to put it into practice. I mean, I think what's really interesting is that, you're going to go through it and you're going to see that, there's potential, right? Trajectories, can shift. A window with self-regulation never, ever closes. And I think it is so hopeful for parents to be able to hear this. The other thing about, for me and FERN and what we do, we don't consider ourselves experts in this, in SelfReg or anything we do. We really turn to parents and consider them the experts. I mean, they come to us with so much knowledge, even about self-regulation, because families culturally, family values, I mean, they are restoring, and it's about really listening and helping them find and that belief and empowering parents that they can do this. It's not about the doing more, because I really want to be careful of that, given what we've heard from with parents. It's about just shifting to do a little bit differently. Yeah. So that's basically the course.
That's great. And Laura, I think I learned that line from you. I go in a lot to parents and even to teachers, and I say, listen, I'm coming in as the behavior expert, but by all means, I am not the expert on your child. You are. Or I'm not the expert in your classroom. You are. And that line, you said it over the years many times, and it's really resonated with me. And it makes sense. It's not about parents doing more. Here's one extra thing you need to do. It's just about shifting your perspective.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Shana. Absolutely. So that's it.
So Laura, that's fantastic. And I love what FERN is doing. You were saying, you can go to self-reg.ca, or you can go to, the Merit Center directly. And these courses are there and they're available for parents, but it's really a self-paced course, and it's here to take this, go for it, one click and you're done.
Yeah.
What I love that FERN York Region is doing is that you guys are actually running virtual classes and discussion classes with parents. So about do this module, and then we'll talk about it and talk about how it's affecting all of us, so that they feel a bit more like a community and that they're not alone in this journey.
I think so. And that's golden, right? I mean, that's where we can support each other. That's where we care for each other. I mean, that word care, it's really one that we've incorporated here at FERN, right? Because just through that caring process of having a space, right, to be with people who kind of get it and who have that similar mindset and who understand stress and that process. I mean, I think for FERN, that's what we do. I think about, and I think you guys know that we run a youth group as well, and we've been running it FERN is about 10 years old. And the youth group has been running almost from day one. And now we're virtual because we're coming out of this pandemic as well. But that youth group, I mean, it really is quite fascinating to even see how these kids have hung on to this group. I mean, they started at such a young age. They're now teens, like they're in high school. We even have a college college student with us now. And I don't think it's because of anything that we're doing. It's because we have this sense of community. It's because we have this sense of belonging, because it's a safe space, right? And we have heard a lot, because I'm really into surveying, families, parents, and the people that come to FERN, and that's really important to us. When we do survey our students, it is exactly what you just said, Sheena. It's just about it kind of is a time for restoration, right? It's a time to lower their stress. Right. And I think if we can offer that to families and to our clients, I think, we're looking after caring for people. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But how can people find out more about you, about FERN? Where can they go?
I think what Shana said, like, you can go to the website and the FERN .com. I'm going to say what it is. I think that's what it is. And we have a lot of our supports and services listed there. That's how you'll find out about me as well. We do have an Instagram at FERN. A lot of our students take that over. So it's kind of a fun place to peek into. It's a lot of our bunny. So
I was just going to say that. I see your bunny all the time on Instagram.
We have a little therapy bunny here who is like the highlight. It's kind of like the mascot of FERN. So everyone's requesting bunny Instagram posts. But anyway, that you can actually travel to that. So that's awesome too. But I think the website's the best way.
Right. So we'll post that in the show notes as well. So it's fernyorkregion.com and we'll post that there, and then information on the parenting SelfReg course is there as well.
Yeah. I am more than, if any of your members or if anyone wants to follow up with me and have any specific questions, I'd be more than willing to speak to them over email, and they can email FERN and I'll get that right away. So I wanted to offer that as well.
Thank you. That's incredible, because it's such a missing piece of what we do. And this was such a brief conversation, but it highlighted so many things that we as professionals need to recognize, as well as, what is happening within a lot of families. So thank you for that, Laura.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been delightful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I highly recommend everybody check it out. It's really useful information. I've done pieces of the course, and it really changes, the way we approach things. And thank you, Laura, for sharing all that with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining today's conversation. Wherever you get your podcast, please go and subscribe, rate, and review so others can find out about us too.
For more from How to ABA, including free resources and ABA materials, visit our blog at howtoaba.com. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more practical tips and updates.